At some point this summer, somebody decided that the best way to steal money from the British people was to generate an image of Nigel Farage attacking the governor of the Bank of England. And this may seem really random, but there's actually a business model behind it. I read the news so that you don't have to. As you can see, the headline says, "The Age of the Populist Financial Scam." Now, stick around because on the surface of it, this may seem like another story about AI deepfakes, but it's more than that. This is about the evolution of the scam, because scammers have always understood greed. Then they learned celebrity, then they learned artificial intelligence, and now they appear to have learned politics. Now, I don't know how pure your algorithm is, but across social media, people have started seeing what looked like footage from BBC's Question Time. So you had Nigel Farage, because obviously you can't keep up those stats for disproportionate airtime if you don't have him on every week. You have Nigel Farage, and then you also have Andrew Bailey, who is the governor of the Bank of England. However, in this interaction, things have apparently gone very wrong. So in one image, you have Farage throwing a glass of water over Bailey. In another, they appear to be physically fighting. And in perhaps my personal favourite, just for sheer commitment to the storyline, Farage pulls a weapon on him. Now, none of this happened. And you know what? For all his bluster and big talk, Farage doesn't even strike me as the type to bust a grape in a fruit fight. And I don't know about Andrew Bailey, but I guarantee you that my gran at 4'11" after a shot of Bailey's would rock Farage's jaw. But anyway, I'm getting off topic and I digress. So needless to say that these images were generated by AI. But here's the thing, the goal wasn't just political propaganda, it was actually an investment scam. The fake story claimed Farage had discovered the Bank of England was withholding really profitable AI trading technology from ordinary people, while allowing wealthy insiders to make money from it. The establishment had been caught, Farage was exposing them, and now you finally were being given access. You just needed to click the link. Act 1, they invented the fight. So let's start with the Farage story, because the construction is actually quite clever. So what the scammers do is they create this fake BBC articles around these ridiculous images, and then they invent an explanation for the supposed fight, which basically is along the lines of like, Nigel Farage discovers that the financial establishment is keeping ordinary people poor, which you're probably thinking, okay, well, he'd be late to the party, but where are we going with this? Let me tell you. Because here comes the pivot. Farage apparently has discovered that the Bank of England has been doing this because they have access to a powerful trading algorithm. But apparently, instead of sharing this miraculous technology with you and me, the system has reserved it for its wealthy friends. So fake Farage then supposedly explains that for decades, people have been trapped, dependent on banks, paying expensive interest, paying advisors, working harder, and somehow never getting ahead. But now, he's going to give ordinary people an alternative. And what's that alternative? An AI trading platform, naturally. So according to this fake advert, you could supposedly make as much as £7,500 a month from an initial investment of just £25. Now, if anybody genuinely discovers a legal way of reliably turning £25 into £7,500 a month, please don't tell Facebook. Maybe you should tell the Nobel Prize Committee. And of course, there's urgency. Places are only available for another 24 hours. The elites don't want you to know. Places are limited. Act now. Basically, every scam technique you've ever seen, except wrapped inside a political story. And that is an important change. Old investment scams, they borrowed authority. So they put Martin Lewis in the advert, they put Elon Musk in it, they put some bloke in a suit next to a BBC logo. The underlying message was, trust this because an important person recommends it. But this newer version is doing something slightly different. It says, trust this because important people don't want you to have it. And psychologically, that's a completely different proposition. The fact that the regulator hasn't approved it, well, that's evidence that the regulator is scared. The fact that the mainstream media hasn't reported it, evidence of a cover-up. The fact that the bank tells you not to transfer the money, of course they would. They're part of the system. You have constructed a scam where every warning sign can be interpreted as proof that the scam is actually real. And according to William Ailes, who is the co-founder of fraud investigation company Rethinking, the reason that we're seeing more of these scripts is probably very simple. They work. He compares the fraud industry to businesses doing A/B testing. So you try different advertisements, different emotional triggers, different stories, and see what generates the most clicks. The ones that fail disappear, and the ones that work multiply. So somewhere along the line, scammers have actually discovered that anti-establishment resentment converts. And then they started improving the product. Act 2, two truths and a lie. Because the best misinformation isn't necessarily completely invented. Sometimes it's far more effective to take something that actually happened and change one crucial part of the story. So the FT found another scam involving the former health secretary Wes Streeting. Now, the scammers used a real political event, his resignation from Keir Starmer's cabinet. That bit happened. His actual resignation letter spoke about problems in political leadership. So the scammers take that real event and write themselves a new ending, kind of like scammer fan fiction. So in their version, Streeton had not resigned over reasons that he actually gave. No. Apparently, he had resigned because the government, together with Andrew Bailey, can't forget him, was refusing to release another miraculous AI trading system that would allow ordinary people to become rich. Again, the establishment is keeping the money from you. Then there was one about Laura Kuenssberg. So she's a BBC journalist, and the scammers basically constructed another fake story around her confronting the founder of Ineos, billionaire Sir Jim Ratcliffe. And that's what they do. You build a story around comments or political controversy that's actually existed in the real world. And all of these scams are really more dangerous than just photoshopping a celebrity head into an advert, right? Because your brain recognizes pieces of the story. You remember Streeting resigning. You've seen Farage on Question Time many times. You've seen him criticize the establishment institutions, even though he belongs to them. You've seen Laura Kuenssberg interviewing politicians, and maybe you remember Jim Ratcliffe being in the news. So when the fake article inserts one completely fabricated claim into the ecosystem, the lie arrives surrounded by familiar furniture. And AI makes producing all of this extraordinarily cheap. You've got fake photographs, newspapers, fake television interviews, voices, fake presenters. You don't need a sophisticated film studio, you just need the software, which means that fraudsters can generate 20 versions, test them, discard 19, and scale whichever one performs the best. Which brings us to another part of the ecosystem. Influencers. Scammers didn't invent the basic aesthetic they're borrowing. Social media has spent years creating a particular financial character. The young man in the Lamborghini, the watch, the Dubai apartment, the laptop beside the infinity pool, and the message, "System told me to work 9 to 5, I escaped, you can too." That narrative is already anti-establishment. School lied to you, university is a scam, your employer is exploiting you. I mean, they could be. You know the stories, and they're saying, I know the shortcut. Andrew Tate actually built an enormous audience, particularly around the rhetoric of escaping conventional systems and becoming independently wealthy. Scammers have subsequently used AI versions of Tate himself to advertise bogus investment products. 20 years ago, if you or somebody wanted to tell millions of people what to do with their money, they would have to have a newspaper column or a television program or like financial institution or some other gatekeeper. Today, a ring light, a microphone, an Instagram account. And I'm not saying that's entirely bad, because traditional finance has absolutely excluded people. Financial institutions, we know, have made huge catastrophic mistakes. Banks have missold products, markets have been manipulated, and regulators have absolutely failed. The financial crisis really did happen. I remember it, I was there. People really did watch institutions get rescued while ordinary households suffered. And that history matters. Because scammers aren't manufacturing mistrust from nothing. They're monetizing mistrust that already exists. And this is unfortunately why just tell people to trust experts is not a particularly convincing anti-fraud strategy. Because what happens when people have legitimate reasons to believe experts and institutions have failed them before? A scammer arrives and says, exactly, that's what I've been telling you. And now we get to the part of the story that worries me the most. Act 3, when distrust becomes the product. So normally when somebody discovers a scam, there's a safety mechanism. So your bank warns you, the regulator puts out an alert, a journalist debunks it, or Facebook removes the advert. A relative may even say, listen, mum, please do not send these people £5,000. But what happens if a scam has already taught the victim that all of those people are enemies? The bank warning doesn't save you, it confirms the conspiracy. The journalist debunking it, mainstream media, of course they'd say that. The FCA says the company isn't authorized. Exactly. The establishment doesn't want ordinary people making money. And this is why I think populist financial scam is actually a really useful description. Not because populism itself equals fraud. It doesn't, because people can have perfectly legitimate anti-establishment political beliefs. The similarity is in the structure of the story. There is you, there is them. They are powerful. You have been cheated. They possess knowledge or wealth that they don't want you to have. And finally, somebody brave has arrived to expose it. Then the financial scam adds one final sentence. Click here. But this doesn't only create victims who lose money. There's a secondary cost. Listen, we know that the BBC doesn't help themselves at all, but every fake BBC article makes the next real BBC article slightly less trustworthy. Every convincing deepfake makes authentic footage easier to dismiss. Every fake Andrew Bailey statement makes it harder for a genuine warning from Andrew Bailey to cut through. And that creates what researchers sometimes describe as liar's dividend. Once everybody knows that convincing fake material exists, genuinely incriminating or inconvenient material can simply be dismissed as AI. So we go from a position of, I believe the fake, to something potentially even worse. I don't believe anything. And fraud thrives in that environment because a society with no trusted referee becomes incredibly easy to manipulate. The FT points to one particularly difficult problem for regulators: platforms themselves. Meta has introduced measures around financial advertising, and the UK has been moving towards stronger requirements around verification and fraudulent ads. But enforcement is still this constant game of whack-a-mole. You delete one account, another appears. You block one advert, they change 3 words. They generate another face again. And AI dramatically changes the economics. A scam operation no longer needs to spend days producing one convincing campaign. It can generate hundreds, different politicians for different audiences, Farage for one demographic, a BBC journalist for another, a business celebrity somewhere else, local language, local grievances, local politics. Same link at the bottom. And that may be one of the craziest or most interesting parts of this, because underneath all the AI, the deep fakes, underneath the politics, the actual scam is incredibly old. Give me your money and I will make you rich. That bit hasn't changed in hundreds of years. What has changed is the wrapper. The scam used to pretend to be your bank, then it pretended to be a celebrity, now it can pretend to be your entire political worldview. And I think that requires us to rethink financial literacy, because telling people don't click suspicious links is increasingly inadequate. It just doesn't work. What if the link sits beneath a beautifully produced BBC article? They say look for spelling mistakes. Well, AI can spell. Check whether the person really said it. What if the voice sounds exactly right? Trust established institutions? What if mistrust of established institutions is precisely the reason the victim clicked? The skill people need more and more isn't simply spotting bad graphics, it's recognizing manipulation. What emotion is this trying to create? Why am I being told to act immediately? Why does this investment opportunity need an enemy? Why am I supposedly one of the lucky few allowed into the secret? And most importantly, why would somebody who's discovered a machine capable of turning £25 into £7,500 a month need my £25? And I think that last question is very effective, because here's something that's quite interesting about the Farage and Andrew Bailey scam. The pictures were absurd. A politician apparently pulling a weapon on the governor of the Bank of England during question time should be enough to make most people pay attention and realize that this is nonsense. But perhaps absurdity isn't always a weakness anymore. We already live in a political environment where things happen every week that 10 years ago somebody would have dismissed as satire. And scammers understand something extremely important about human beings. We don't necessarily believe the most convincing story. Very often we believe the story that best explains how we already feel. If you feel economically cheated, they will show you people supposedly cheating you. If you distrust banks, banks become the villain. If you distrust politicians, they'll give you a rebel. If you distrust the media, they will give you the story that the media supposedly tried to hide. And then once they've built a world in which everybody except the scammer is lying to you, they'll ask for your bank details. So yes, AI is making financial fraud technology more sophisticated, but I don't think technology is the most interesting development here. Psychology is. Scammers have realized that in an age of collapsing institutional trust, the easiest way to steal from somebody may no longer be to impersonate authority. It may be to tell them that authority is the reason you're poor, and then offer to help them get their money back for a small initial deposit, obviously.